I'm Mike Wagner. I have the privilege of being the William T. Evu Distinguished Chair for the Wisconsin IDEA, the Director of the Center for Communication and Civic Renewal, and a professor in the School of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I'll be your guide as we engage in a civic sift of important social questions and their research-based answers. So let's get to civically sifting and winnowing. On this inaugural episode of the Civic Sift, we explore how we know that we can trust the vote count in Wisconsin. That is, how do we know that election administrators in our state are counting our votes legally, accurately, and transparently? We talk to election administrators as well as political and legal experts to find our way to the verifiable truth. Let's get sifting. After the 2020 presidential elections, many people, including then-President Trump, falsely claimed that he won the election, when in reality, Joe Biden did. In his late October 2024 interview with podcaster Joe Rogan, former President Trump again falsely claimed that he won the election. Concerns about election integrity fall into a number of categories, including whether the people who are voting legally, whether the counting of ballots is somehow compromised, and whether alternative voting procedures like absentee voting and voting by mail can be trusted. Dane County Clerk Scott McConnell says elections are a checks and balances version of throwing a party between county clerks and municipal clerks.
We set up the party, the county clerk, we create the ballot, we create the media, and then we hand that off to municipal clerks, and then they throw the party, they hire the poll workers, they run the election on election day. And then election night, we get all the results back, post it on our website, we do the certification, we do the recount. So we're cleaning up the party.
And that election party is safe and secure. Greene County Clerk Ariana Vagley says for absentee ballots and for voting in person, the election process in Wisconsin starts with the voter sharing a valid ID.
They're looking at those IDs that are on file to make sure they're still valid. If they're not valid, they would be reaching out to the voter at that point to collect a valid photo ID. Once everything is reviewed with the application and the ID, once ballots are ready, then ballots start going out in the mail.
How are clerks sure that you are who you say you are when you show up to vote?
Us in Texas have the strictest voter ID law in the country, which can be frustrating to me in some ways, but on the flip side, it means that is a great check against anything, someone impersonating something. And the other thing I tell you people is committing a felony to cast one ballot makes zero sense.
And how do we know if a voter who voted absentee tries to show up again and vote on election day?
There will be a watermark over that voter's record in the poll book saying absentee has been issued, absentee has been returned. So we're looking at those things on election day. So if we're seeing somebody that's coming through that has that watermark in the poll book, we're going to ask them, okay, did you complete and return your absentee ballot? We are going to know. You're going to have that watermark printed right there in the poll book. It's going to say either an absentee ballot has been issued, and that means that the clerk has not received it back at the time that the poll books were printed, or if we receive the completed ballot back, before poll books are printed, that watermark is going to say absentee returned. And poll workers are going through and processing those absentee ballots throughout the day, logging them into the poll book, assigning a voter number there. So we're going to know if you've returned and cast an absentee ballot.
If people choose not to return their absentee ballot or don't think it will make it in the mail on time, they can vote in person. These voters are allowed to vote on election day.
And then if for whatever reason an absentee ballot for that voter comes in later on in the day, that ballot then gets rejected because that voter has then voted in person.
Many of us voting in person on election day will have our ballot fed into a machine. Some folks wonder about whether these machines can be trusted. UW-Madison elections expert Barry Burden says concerns about voting machines' accuracy are understandable but misplaced.
Yeah, it's understandable that people might be suspicious of machines doing the counting, but machines have been doing the counting for a very long time. They're very good at it, and they have been tested and assured to be free of the kinds of problems that have been circulating as mis and disinformation over the past few years. Everyone in the state who casts a ballot will have either a paper ballot that they mark or will have a paper backup that can be counted and verified in an audit.
Vaguely adds that we don't need to worry about voting machines getting hacked on the internet either.
A lot of people have a misconception that the machines are connected to the internet. Our machines are never connected to the internet. The voting machine all the way into the elections database system here in my office, never connected to the internet. Here in Greene County, we use fax modems. So I think it's pretty secure. I always try to tell people, have you ever heard of somebody hacking a fax machine?
The process is extremely transparent. In Dane County, Scott McConnell says that anyone can see every single ballot cast.
Now in Dane County, what we also do after the election, the scanner takes a digital image of every one of your ballots. We post those to the web, every one of them. You can click through them all.
Of course, it isn't up to us to scroll through thousands of ballots online to confirm the results of the election. Local teams in every county double-check the votes from the memory sticks on each machine to the literal tape that provides evidence of each vote.
We check it against the tapes. The clerks check the results. Everything is checked because we assume there was some error.
Clerks also look for irregularities based on past voting behavior. A county that is voting in a way that is very different from how it voted in the past will get even closer scrutiny for accuracy. Vaguely adds that those who are skeptical of an election result they don't like on election night should ask themselves if they are skeptical of the results they do like.
Did you have any distrust in our machines in 2016 for that election? And they say, no, why not? I said, well, it's the same machines and the same programming that we used in 2020. So, nothing has changed there.
Dane County Clerk McConnell agrees.
Like if it was rigged, no one would rig it that way. It doesn't make any sense. Number one. Two, you can witness and see all of these processes. I mean, you're allowed to go to the polling place and look. I know sometimes we get observers who've heard all this stuff and they're waiting for some bus of people from Nicaragua to let out in front of the place and nothing happens. And they're like, what happened? Nothing happened. Like, yeah, that's pretty normal. That's how it works around here. So the more they get involved in the process, the more faith they have in it.
Of course, clerks are not just asking us to take their word for it. The voting and counting processes in Wisconsin are extremely transparent.
Well, any observer can be in the polling place watching, who comes up to vote. They have to say their address, for example. You can hear the absentee ballots being, opened and read into the poll book.
Clerks like vaguely add that when it comes to observing the process, the more the merrier.
I always encourage people to just be a part of the process. Come to the close of polls, see how we receive and transmit results at the end of the night. Come to the county board of canvass, see how we go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. Be a poll worker, be a part of that process.
Scott Thompson of Law Forward, which handles a number of election integrity cases, reminds us that all the things observers of our voting process see is something that inspires a lot of confidence in the integrity of our elections.
So I think that Wisconsin has one of the most successful election administration systems in the country. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we have around 1,850 local municipal clerks, and they frequently know the people in their community who are voting. They have individual relationships with the towns and villages where they come from.
Now, many of the ballots that get counted on Election Day were actually cast early. One common conspiracy theory in Wisconsin pertains to the way that absentee ballots are counted. It can take until the middle of the night to count and report them all in Milwaukee County, given the sheer number of early votes that get cast. What most folks don't know is that clerks legally cannot verify the integrity of the ballots or count the votes at all until Election Day. Larger counties handle this process differently. Some bring the absentee ballots to the polling places where people would have voted and have them processed there. Milwaukee County, and a few others, use a central location to verify and count the ballots. This matters for which results get reported when.
So Dane actually usually is the first county to report. And part of it is we don't use central count. So central count is where you divert the absentee ballots to a central location and you have a high-speed scanner count them. That is super common in big cities around the country. Other places like Janesville, Green Bay do it as well. So it's not just Milwaukee.
So, people have to prove who they are to vote. They can't vote twice. The voting machines can't be hacked on the web because they are not connected to the web, and absentee ballot counting follows the letter of the law in a carefully prescribed process. After the ballots are counted, 5% of jurisdictions in Wisconsin are selected for random audits, where hand counts are spot checked against machine counts. At every step of the way, people from both sides of the aisle are watching.
People don't realize how many checks and balances there are within the system. They don't realize how there's Democrats and Republicans reviewing everything in the polls and every step of the way.
Well, there are things done both before and after the election to ensure that the election system is sound and accurate. Before the election, every clerk in the state has to test their voting equipment, and they have to do it in public. Any member of the public can come watch this process. It involves usually grabbing a stack of blank ballots, marking them up as if voters had cast ballots, and running them through the machine in front of everyone to watch to ensure that the machines are counting them accurately.
And don't forget, the people doing the work are your friends and neighbors.
Feature of Wisconsin, because that's not true everywhere. I mean, so there's 2,400 election officials who have access to the voter database in Wisconsin. The same number in Minnesota is 300. It is centralized to the counties, which is common. That is the common model. And it creates efficiencies, it creates all kinds of things. But what thing it doesn't do, it means the clerk isn't your neighbor in Mount Horeb.
Despite the fact that Wisconsin elections are so well run, so transparent, and have a fabulous record for accuracy, many people who are upset at some election results choose to attack or threaten clerks in our state. These threats could actually harm our ability to keep running elections at a high level.
It is causing turnover. I know some county clerks who would have stayed on longer, who retired and just said, you know, this isn't worth it. Part of the problem is it doesn't pay that well. And it's just the abuse can be really personal. And, you know, they threaten people's family. And
we see a lot of turnover with clerks, especially post 2020. I would say well over half of the clerks that are here are different than the clerks that were here in 2020. And some of that comes from, of course, the aftermath of 2020, the distrust and the lack of confidence. And, you know, in the smaller municipalities and, you know, even some of the smaller cities or villages, you know, these are your neighbors and your friends and your family members that are making these claims. And people just don't want to deal with that when they, you know, are constantly being questioned and criticized, having concerns for their own safety. You know, there were threats and all kinds of stuff.
You know, in some cases, it's driven good people out of working in elections because of the difficulty of the job. In other cases, I think election officials have doubled down and really have wanted to stick to their positions and try to hang around for at least one more election cycle to get things back to where they were before 2020.
McConnell hopes the country can move beyond its current polarized state.
we need to get through this period of our history and return to a situation where we both are agreeing that we solve our problems through the ballot box and not through violence, which is what most of human history is the other way around. This is still an experiment, which we're seeing firsthand right now. And I think it's an important one to be a part of, and I believe in it.
That wraps up our first Civic Sift. We'll keep sharing transparently produced, high-quality evidence about important topics in our episodes to come. Not all topics are as straightforward as election administration. We'll tell you about issues where scholars agree, as well as areas of inquiry where there are ongoing debates about what the verifiable truth is and under what conditions it's present. For now, we hope to see you at the ballot box, exercising your right to be heard. For the Civic Sift, I'm Mike Wagner.
Thank your clerk.